The Zorth High Command, safe inside their massive hive ship lurking behind the moon, clicked and chittered in cold amusement. To them, the human counterattack had been nothing more than a brief irritation, like a swarm of flies buzzing against a window. Their overmind, an ancient living network of billions of linked brains, calculated that Earth would fall within days. They had conquered 100 worlds before ours, each one surrendering after the first demonstration of overwhelming power. The avian diplomats of the Concorde had folded without firing a shot. The crystalline scholars had shattered under orbital bombardment. Why should these noisy, emotional primates be any different? Folks, that right there is the fatal mistake every arrogant empire makes. They measure strength only in weapons and numbers, never in the stubborn fire that burns inside a species that has clawed its way to the top of its own food chain. Back on Earth, the night after the first battle was anything but quiet. In underground command centers, factories, and even suburban garages, lights burned bright as people worked through the darkness. Captain Elena Vargas walked the corridors of the Endeavour, now docked at a hidden orbital station for emergency repairs. Her boots echoed on the metal grating, and every face she passed carried the same mix of exhaustion and determination. She stopped at the medical bay where Sergeant Mia Chen lay hooked to machines, her chest wrapped in regenerative bandages. Mia managed a weak grin. "Did we make them bleed, Captain?" she asked. Elena nodded. "We made them bleed, Sergeant. And tomorrow we make them bleed more. You see, that's a small moment, but it's everything. Aliens don't visit their wounded to share quiet promises. They don't need to. Humans do because our courage isn't programmed, it's chosen one heartbeat at a time." In the engineering deck, Dr. Raj Patel worked beside a dozen volunteers, their hands black with grease as they stripped parts from captured Zorth drones. Raj held up a glowing power cell no bigger than a coffee mug. "This little beauty puts out more energy than our best fusion reactors," he said, eyes shining with that pure joy only a true inventor feels when faced with something new and dangerous. "If we can reverse the polarity and overload the containment field," he didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone in the room understood. They were turning the enemy's own weapons into bombs. A young mechanic from Kenya laughed nervously. "My grandfather fixed tractors with duct tape and hope. Guess we're not so different." And there it is again, that human thread running through history. We've always been the species that makes do, that turns scraps into solutions. It's not pretty, it's not elegant, but it works. Meanwhile, on the surface, ordinary people were becoming extraordinary. In the ruins of Los Angeles, a schoolteacher named Sofia Ramirez organized neighborhood watches armed with hunting rifles and homemade Molotovs. When Zorth landing pods touched down in the outskirts, her group didn't run. They lured the insectoid warriors into narrow streets, collapsed buildings on top of them, and vanished into the sewers before reinforcements arrived. Word spread fast across global networks. The aliens could be hurt. They could be tricked. In Tokyo, salarymen who had never held a weapon learned to fire railguns assembled from maglev train parts. In the Sahara, nomadic tribes used sandstorms as cover to plant mines scavenged from old battlefields. Everywhere the same pattern. Underestimate humans and you give us time to adapt. That's the first big lesson of this story, friends. Never give humans time. Aboard the Endeavour, Ensign Liam O'Connor sat hunched over a console, his fingers flying across holographic keys as he sliced deeper into captured Zorth communication protocols. The code was alien in every sense, layers of pheromone-based encryption mixed with quantum entanglement, but Liam had grown up cracking video games and government firewalls for fun. "They're not as smart as they think," he muttered. "Their security is built on the assumption that no one would ever dare think differently than the Hive." Within hours he had isolated a command frequency used to direct drone swarms. A slow smile spread across his face. "If we broadcast a fake overmind signal, we can make their own drones turn on each other." Elena, watching over his shoulder, felt a surge of pride. This kid was barely 20, yet here he was rewriting the rules of war. That's what youth brings to the fight, fresh eyes that haven't learned to accept impossible. But the Zorth weren't idle. At 0300 Earth Standard Time, a second wave screamed through the atmosphere, this time targeting power grids and communication hubs. Blackouts rolled across continents like a dark tide. For a terrifying hour, humanity fought blind. Cities burned under uncontrolled plasma barrages. In the chaos, a new threat emerged. Smaller, faster Zorth craft began dropping infiltration pods directly into population centers. These weren't soldiers, they were breeders. Each pod carried a queen larva designed to burrow underground and begin producing thousands of warriors within weeks. If even one succeeded, Earth would face an unstoppable ground infestation. Panic threatened to break the fragile global unity. Some leaders whispered about surrender, about offering tribute in exchange for mercy. Elena heard the rumors and felt ice in her veins. She had studied history, Munich, 1938, the lessons of appeasement carved into every classroom wall. "We do not negotiate with exterminators," she broadcast on every remaining channel. "We fight or we die as a species." The turning point came at dawn over the Atlantic. A combined fleet of repurposed civilian ships, cargo haulers, cruise liners, even private yachts retrofitted with missile pods, met the Zorith's second wave head-on. It should have been suicide. The human ships were slow, lightly armored, and crewed by volunteers with only days of training. But Raj's overloaded power cells had been distributed as warheads, and Liam's fake overmind signal was ready. As the alien formation closed in perfect geometric precision, the human fleet scattered in what looked like total disarray. The Zorith commanders, confident in their superiority, pursued individual targets to pick them off one by one. That was their second fatal mistake, assuming chaos meant weakness. At the perfect moment, Elena gave the order. Hundreds of human ships broadcast the false overmind command on every frequency. Zorith drones hesitated, confused by conflicting hive imperatives. Then the overloaded power cells detonated in chain reactions, turning the sky into a fireworks display of blue-white plasma. Alien vessels caught in the crossfire of their own confused escorts began to fracture and burn. It wasn't a rout, not yet, but for the first time the Zorith lost more ships than we did. Cheers echoed across surviving comm channels. Strangers embraced in bunkers. A species that hours earlier had teetered on despair now dared to hope. Yet victory always demands payment. The Endeavour herself took critical damage shielding a refugee convoy. Elena ordered evacuation pods launched while she and a skeleton crew stayed behind to guide the crippled ship away from populated areas. As the station broke apart around her, she recorded one final message for Earth. "Tell them we bought them time. Tell them to use it well. And tell them humanity is just getting started." The escape pod jettisoned seconds before the reactor went critical, a silent fireball blooming against the stars. Elena Vargas survived, battered and burned, washing ashore on a beach in Portugal where local fishermen pulled her from the waves. When she opened her eyes to see human faces looking down at her, she smiled through cracked lips. "Still here," she whispered. "Still fighting." And that, friends, is where part 1 truly ends. On a beach at sunrise with one exhausted woman staring at the horizon where alien ships still darkened the sky. The war was far from over. The Zorith were angry now, no longer amused. Billions more waited in the dark between stars. But humanity had learned its first crucial truth: we were not prey. We were something new in the galaxy, adaptable, creative, unbreakable when united. The 1,000-year peace was dead, but something fiercer had been born in its place. The fire was lit, and it would not go out. The sun rose blood-red over a wounded Earth, filtered through smoke and the shimmering remnants of atmospheric shields. 3 weeks had passed since the first Zorith retreat, and the planet held its breath. Cities lay half-ruined, power flickered in and out, and every night the sky glowed with the silent dance of orbital debris burning up on re-entry. Yet humanity did not break. Folks, if you've ever wondered what we're made of, look at those weeks. We buried our dead at dawn, patched our wounds by noon, and went back to work inventing new ways to kill the enemy by dusk. That's not poetry, that's history repeating itself, from London in the Blitz to Kiev in our own century. Pain doesn't stop us, it focuses us. Admiral Elena Vargas, no longer just captain after her survival made her a living symbol, stood on the rebuilt bridge of the newly christened US Defiant, a hybrid warship built from the fused hulls of the old Endeavour and 2 captured Zorith cruisers. Scars crisscrossed her face where shrapnel had kissed her during the crash, but her eyes burned brighter than ever. Around her, the crew moved with quiet efficiency. Veterans now, no longer wide-eyed recruits. Dr. Raj Patel, his new cybernetic arm gleaming under the lights, calibrated a bank of shimmering Zorith-derived shield emitters. "Their tech is beautiful," he admitted almost reverently, "but it's brittle. Designed for perfect conditions. Ours has to work in mud, rain, and human error." Sergeant Mia Chin, fully healed and promoted to major, reviewed ground reports on a side screen, her jaw tight as she read casualty figures from Sydney. Ensign Liam O'Connor, taller now, it seemed from carrying the weight of war, monitored long-range sensors. The team had become family forged in fire. Down on the surface the whispers began. Not the kind you hear, but the kind you feel in your gut when things go too quiet. Zorith activity had dropped to almost nothing. No new landings, no orbital bombardments. Scouts reported their fleets holding position just beyond the moon as if waiting. Military analysts called it a strategic pause. Civilians called it something else, the calm before the storm. Rumors spread faster than facts in the blackouts. Some said the aliens were negotiating secretly with certain governments. Others claimed the Zorith had already won and were simply toying with us. A few fringe channels even suggested humanity should surrender while we still had something to bargain with. Doubt is a slow poison, friends, and the enemy knew it. They didn't need to fire a shot to make us question ourselves. Elena felt it too. Late one night in her quarters, she stared at old family photos salvaged from her flooded apartment. Her parents, her little brother lost to an Earth war decades earlier. Are we just delaying the inevitable? She whispered to the empty room. But then she remembered the fishermen who pulled her from the sea, strangers who risked patrols to save one half-drowned soldier. She remembered children in refugee camps drawing pictures of human ships chasing away the bug monsters. That was the antidote to doubt, remembering why we fight. Not for flags or borders but for the people next to us. That's the HFY truth the Zorith could never calculate. Our strength isn't in perfect unity but in chosen loyalty. The storm broke without warning on the 42nd day. Sensors screamed as thousands of Zorith signatures blinked into existence, not in orbit but inside the atmosphere, scattered across every continent. They had used a new stealth method, folding space in tiny ripples to slip past defenses. This wasn't an invasion wave. This was infestation. Drop pods rained like metal hail, each one carrying elite warriors and breeder queens. At the same moment, something worse launched from the hidden hive ship, silver missiles trailing faint green vapor. Bioweapons. Liam's face went pale as he decoded the payload signatures. Tailored phage virus, he reported, voice cracking. Engineered to target human DNA specifically. Projected mortality, 98% within 72 hours. Silence fell across the bridge. For the first time the crew looked lost. But humans don't stay lost for long. Major Mia Chin slammed her fist on the console. Then we have 72 hours to make sure those missiles never reach the ground. Orders flew. Every available fighter, shuttle, and armed civilian craft launched in a desperate intercept swarm. Raj rerouted all shield power to forward deflectors, turning the Defiant into a flying battering ram. Elena took the helm herself, diving the massive ship straight into the thickest cluster of missiles over the Indian Ocean. It was madness, suicidal, but it was also the only chance. Plasma beams lanced out, vaporizing dozens of warheads. Tractor fields yanked others off course into empty sea. But there were too many. One slipped through, streaking toward Mumbai. On the ground, Dr. Sofia Ramirez, the same schoolteacher from Los Angeles, saw it coming. She had relocated to India to help with refugee education, never expecting to fight again. Now she stood on a rooftop with a shoulder-fired railgun scavenged from a downed drone, tracking the missile's descent. Not today, she muttered and fired. The slug hit true, detonating the warhead high above the city in a green fireball. Fallout drifted, but the virus burned up in the explosion. Across the planet, similar stories repeated. Farmers with hunting rifles, teenagers with hacked drones, grandmothers driving trucks into landing pods. Ordinary people doing impossible things because surrender wasn't an option. Yet the cost was brutal. Over Africa, an entire interceptor wing sacrificed itself to shield Lagos, ramming a cluster of missiles in a chain of fireballs that lit the night. In Europe, Paris burned again as Zorith warriors carved through defenses. Mia led a rapid response team into the streets, fighting house to house. She lost half her squad saving a hospital, dragging wounded children into basements while plasma scorched the air above. "We hold," she growled into her comm, blood running down her armor. "We always hold." And they did, long enough for Raj to broadcast an emergency countermeasure. Using captured Zorith biotech samples, he'd synthesized a broad-spectrum antiviral and uploaded the formula to every 3D bioprinter still online. Within hours, clinics and garages were churning out doses. Not perfect, not elegant, but enough to blunt the plague. As the bioattack faltered, Liam uncovered the deeper plan. Buried in intercepted traffic was a single repeated command pulse. Seed the doubt. Fracture the hive from within. The Zorith weren't just trying to kill us, they were trying to make us kill hope. That's when Elena understood. She called a global address, patched through every remaining network, every radio, every speaker in every bunker. Her scarred face filled screens worldwide. "They think we're weak because we argue, because we doubt, because we fear," she said, voice steady as steel. "But that's not weakness. That's what makes us human. We question so we can find truth. We fear so we can find courage. We doubt so we can choose to believe anyway. They will never understand that. The speech lasted 4 minutes. In those 4 minutes something shifted. Riots of despair turned into rallies of defiance. Surrender petitions burned in the streets. The tide turned at the Battle of the Ring. Zorith forces, frustrated by failed bioweapons, committed their full reserve to a decisive strike on the orbital shipyards where human hybrid fleets were being born. Elena met them head-on with everything Earth could spare. 300 ships, half of them jury-rigged civilian hulls bristling with stolen weapons. The Zorith came in perfect formation, a glittering wall of death. Humans came in chaos, weaving, unpredictable, broadcasting false signals, jamming sensors, sacrificing decoys to draw fire. Raja's new adaptive shields flickered across the fleet, learning enemy patterns in real time and shifting frequencies faster than the hive could adjust. Liam unleashed a cascade of hacked commands, turning entire Zorith squadrons against each other in brief, glorious confusion. In the heart of the melee, the Defiant dueled a Zorith dreadnought 3 times her size. Shields failed, hulls breached, crew died at their posts. Elena refused to retreat. "Ram them," she ordered calmly. The collision shook the stars. Both ships locked together, drifting, burning. Boarding parties fought corridor by corridor in zero-G hell. Mia led the human assault, cutting through chitin armor with plasma torches when guns ran dry. At the dreadnought's core she faced a Zorith commander, a towering creature dripping ichor. It spoke through a translator, voice like grinding glass. "Your species will break." Mia laughed, blood on her teeth. "We break all the time. Then we get back up stronger." She detonated the core charges. The explosion carved a new crater on the moon visible from Earth. When the smoke cleared, the Zorith reserve was shattered. Survivors fled beyond the heliopause, trailing wreckage. Earth cheered until voices gave out. But Elena, standing on the Defiant's battered bridge amid the bodies of friends, did not celebrate. She looked at the stars where the enemy had vanished and spoke quietly. "They'll come back. Bigger. Meaner. And next time they won't underestimate us." The crew nodded. They were ready. Because doubt had been faced, named, and beaten. Not erased, humans will always doubt, but transformed into fuel. That's the real lesson of Part 2, folks. The enemy can take our cities, our ships, even our loved ones. But they can never take the part of us that chooses to keep going anyway. The whispers faded, replaced by a single, stubborn roar. "We are still here. And we are just warming up." The weeks after the Battle of the Ring were strangely quiet again, but this time the silence felt different. It wasn't the heavy, doubtful hush of waiting for doom. It was the focused stillness of a workshop right before the final test. Earth's factories ran 3 shifts around the clock. Orbital yards, patched together from wreckage and hope, launched a new ship every 48 hours. Children in refugee camps learned to read by tracing schematics of Zorith shield nodes. Everywhere you looked, humanity was studying the enemy the way a surgeon studies a tumor, coldly, thoroughly, and with absolute intent to remove it. Admiral Elena Vargas stood in the briefing room of the US Defiant, surrounded by holographic star maps that glittered like frost. The scars on her face caught the blue light as she addressed her expanded command staff. Major Mia Chen leaned against a bulkhead, arms crossed, her eyes sharp despite the fatigue. Dr. Raj Patel floated a captured Zorith neural node in a containment field, watching it pulse faintly. Ensign. No, now Lieutenant. Liam O'Connor projected fresh intercepts across the main display. A new face had joined them. Commander Sofia Ramirez, the former schoolteacher from Los Angeles and Mumbai, promoted for her impossible shots and impossible courage. She still carried the railgun slung across her back like a reminder that heroes don't always start out wearing uniforms. "We've hurt them," Elena began, voice calm but carrying that edge that made everyone straighten. "We've made them bleed. Made them retreat, made them question their own perfection. But hurting isn't enough. We need to cut out the heart." She tapped the hologram, zooming in on a jagged, organic-looking structure drifting in the dark between Mars and the asteroid belt. "This is Hive Prime 9, their forward command nexus. It's not just a ship. It's a living extension of the Overmind itself, part brain, part factory, part queen. If we destroy it, the entire invasion force loses cohesion. Their fleets will fracture. Their warriors will revert to instinct without higher direction." The room absorbed the words. Everyone knew what came next. Someone had to go inside. Boarding an active Zorith hive ship was considered impossible by every alien expert still alive in the old Concord archives. The internal structure shifted like living tissue. Defenses were biomechanical, Walls that bled acid, corridors that sealed and flooded with toxin, guardians grown specifically for the task. But humans have a habit of turning impossible into Tuesday. Raj raised his cybernetic hand. We've been analyzing the wreckage from the dreadnought Mia blew up. There's a pattern to the shifting, predictable if you know the pheromone triggers. I can synthesize a counter-scent that fools their sensors into reading us as part of the hive. Sophia grinned. So we walk in wearing their own smell. I like it. Liam added quietly, and I've mapped a repeating command cycle in their internal network. There's a 37-second window every hour when the Overmind node is vulnerable to direct upload. Elena nodded. Then that's our window. We go in small, fast, and loud when it counts. The mission team was 12 strong, volunteers only. They launched from the Defiant in a stealth shuttle disguised as Zorith debris, drifting silently toward Hive Prime 9 on a trajectory that looked like random tumble. Inside the shuttle, the air was thick with tension and the sharp chemical smell of Raj's pheromone spray. Mia checked weapons one last time, hybrid rifles that fired both human slugs and captured plasma bolts. Sophia led a quiet prayer in Spanish, her voice steady. Liam clutched a data spike the size of a finger, the virus he'd spent weeks perfecting loaded inside. Elena, in plain armor without admiral's markings, looked at each of them. No speeches, she said. You already know why we're here. Just remember, whatever happens in there, the rest of humanity is counting on us to show the galaxy what we're really made of. Docking was the first miracle. The hive ship's outer membrane parted for them, mistaking the shuttle for returning debris. They stepped into a world that felt like the inside of a living creature, warm, humid, pulsing with bioluminescent veins along the walls. The air tasted metallic. Sounds echoed strangely as if the ship itself was breathing. Their boots stuck slightly to the resin floor. Almost immediately, worker drones skittered past, ignoring them completely. Raj's counterscent worked better than hoped. But the deeper they went, the more the ship seemed to notice something wrong. Walls rippled. Drones paused and turned compound eyes toward them. Mia whispered, "It's learning. We have to move faster." The first real fight came in a nursery chamber the size of a cathedral. Thousands of Zorith larvae hung in sacks, tended by armored nurses the size of bears. When the team's presence finally triggered an alarm, the nurses attacked in a wave of claws and acid spray. Plasma fire lit the gloom. Sophia took a slash across her thigh but kept firing, covering Liam as he sprinted for a data port. Mia wrestled a nurse to the ground, jamming her knife into its neural cluster. Elena dragged a wounded Marine to cover, returning fire with grim precision. They lost 2 people there, Petty Officer Kim and Corporal Alvarez, bodies dissolved before they could be recovered. The team pressed on, leaving charges behind to collapse the chamber. Sacrifice, always sacrifice. But every loss sharpened their focus rather than breaking it. Deeper still, the corridors narrowed into veins. The air grew thicker, almost syrupy. Psychic pressure began to build, the Overmind's first direct assault. Whispered voices filled their minds. Images of Earth burning, loved ones screaming, promises of painless surrender. Sophia stumbled, seeing her students dying again. Liam froze, hearing his mother call from a childhood he'd lost in the first week of war. Even Elena wavered for a heartbeat, seeing her brother's face. But Mia's voice cut through like a blade. They're lying. All of it. Push forward. She grabbed Liam by the armor and shoved him onward. That moment taught us something profound, friends. Aliens use psychic weapons because their minds are linked, predictable. Human minds are messy, individual, stubborn. We can choose to reject the illusion even when it hurts. They reached the central node chamber at the exact minute of the vulnerability window. The Overmind floated in a sphere of neural fluid, a massive brain-like mass threaded with glowing filaments. Guardian elites, huge, winged warriors, dropped from the ceiling in a storm of blades. The final battle was brutal and short. Mia fought like a woman possessed, drawing fire to protect Liam as he jacked into the port. Raj lobbed improvised EMP grenades that stunned the Guardians long enough for Sophia to plant shaped charges on structural supports. Elena covered the retreat, emptying her rifle into the Overmind's protective field until it sparked and failed. Liam's hands shook as he uploaded the virus. 37 seconds. The Overmind screamed, a psychic wail that dropped half the team to their knees. Visions of total annihilation flooded their minds. But Liam kept typing, whispering through clenched teeth, "Not today. Not ever." At second 35, the upload completed. The chamber lights flickered. The Overmind convulsed. Throughout the hive ship, systems began to fail. Guardians froze mid-attack. Walls stopped shifting. Extraction was chaos. The ship started collapsing in on itself, sections sealing as the dying overmind lashed out. Sophia was hit by falling debris, her leg pinned. "Go!" she shouted, shoving a detonator into Mia's hand. "Finish it." Tears in her eyes, Mia armed the charges and ran. The team dragged their wounded toward the shuttle as explosions rippled behind them. They lost Sophia and one more Marine, but the shuttle tore free just as Hive Prime 9 imploded in a silent, blooming cloud of organic fragments. Back aboard the Defiant, the crew watched long-range sensors in stunned silence. Across the solar system, Zorith ships began drifting off course. Formations broke. Some fired on each other in confusion. The invasion force, leaderless, started to unravel. Cheers erupted across Earth's networks, quiet at first, then roaring. But Elena stood on the bridge, staring at the debris field where 4 of her people had just died. Victory tasted like ash mixed with hope. She turned to the remaining team, Mia, Raj, Liam, and the survivors. "We cut out one heart," she said softly. "But the overmind is distributed. There are bigger nodes out there, closer to their home clusters. This war isn't over." Mia nodded, wiping blood from her face. "Then we go cut out the rest." Raj managed a tired smile. "And next time we'll do it cleaner." Liam looked older than his years. "We prove they can bleed at the core. That changes everything." And it did. Word spread through the remnants of the Galactic Concord. Species that had hidden or surrendered now sent tentative messages of support. Humanity, the young upstarts, had done what no ancient civilization dared: struck the Zorith where they lived. That's the deepest HFY truth in Part 3, folks. The Hive thinks as one, perfectly synchronized but brittle. We think as many, sometimes arguing, sometimes doubting, but when we choose the same purpose, nothing in the galaxy can stand against us. The heart of the Hive was wounded. The real war, the one for the future, was just beginning. And humanity was ready to take the fight to the stars themselves. The destruction of Hive Prime 9 sent shockwaves through the Zorith Empire that even humanity could feel. For the first time in recorded galactic history, a Hive node had been silenced by an outside force. Across their fleets, the endless chittering of the overmind grew faint, like a radio losing signal. Warriors on distant outposts paused mid-task, their compound eyes glazing over as higher directives vanished. Drones drifted aimlessly. Some ships simply powered down, waiting for orders that would never come. Back on Earth, we watched the sensor feeds in stunned disbelief. We had wounded the beast at its core. But beasts, when wounded, become more dangerous than ever. Admiral Elena Vargas gathered her war council in the Defiant's newly expanded briefing theater. Holograms flickered around the table. Commanders from every continent, orbital yard chiefs, even representatives from the small but growing Martian and lunar colonies. Major Mia Chin stood at Elena's right, her armor still bearing scorch marks from the Hive raid. Dr. Raj Patel projected cascading data streams showing Zorith fleet movements, fractured, yes, but massing in unprecedented numbers near the asteroid belt. Lieutenant Liam O'Connor, fingers dancing over controls, highlighted a new signature: heavier, more disciplined formations that didn't match pure Zorith patterns. "They've called in allies," he said quietly. "The Vexery Dominion. Serpentine heavy assault specialists. Old enemies of the Concord, older allies of convenience to the Zorith." Elena's scarred face tightened. Then the war just got bigger. The Vexery were everything the Zorith were not: individual, cunning, and viciously proud. Where the insects fought as a single organism, the serpent folk fought as elite predators, fast strike cruisers, cloaked boarding torpedoes, warriors who preferred blades to plasma because they liked to feel the kill. Their arrival turned the solar system into a three-sided chessboard. Zorith remnants needed time to regrow command nodes. Vexery needed glory and territory. Humanity needed to survive long enough to turn the tide. Folks, this is where the real test began, not just holding our ground but taking the fight outward while everything we loved still burned behind us. The first joint Zorith-Vexery offensive struck Mars. The red planet had become humanity's forge, vast automated mines feeding orbital factories, domes growing food under artificial suns, colonies of stubborn settlers who refused to abandon the dream of a multi-planet species. When the enemy fleet translated in-system, cloaked until the last moment, the colonists had only hours to prepare. Commander Aya Nakamura, a third-generation Martian born in low gravity, coordinated the defense from Olympus City. Her voice was calm across open channels: "We are not evacuating. This is our home. We fight here." Miners repurposed drilling charges into orbital mines. Habitat engineers vented atmosphere to create deceptive thermal blooms. Children too young to hold rifles helped reload magazines in underground armories. The Battle of Mars lasted 9 days and became legend. Vexori boarding parties slithered through breached domes in null-gravity elegance, scales shimmering under emergency lights. Martian defenders met them with improvised weapons. Rail spikes fired from mining rigs, liquid oxygen traps that flash-froze armored hides, corridors flooded with Martian dust so fine it jammed joints and choked intakes. Mia Chun led a relief force from Earth, dropping straight through the atmosphere in re-entry pods that burned like meteors. She hit the surface running, linking up with Nakamura's militia. Together they turned the Tharsis bulges into killing grounds, luring Vexori elites into lava tubes and collapsing them with shaped charges. Raj, orbiting above, unleashed swarms of adaptive drones that learned Vexori cloak patterns mid-fight and painted targets for kinetic bombardments from reclaimed Zorith railguns. But every meter gained cost blood. On the 5th day, a Vexori dreadnought punched through orbital defenses and glassed Elysium Planitia, vaporizing 3 domes and 20,000 souls in minutes. Elena watched the feed from the Defiant and felt something cold settle in her chest. She ordered an immediate counterstrike on the dreadnought's support cruisers, accepting heavy losses to draw the enemy flagship into a trap. Liam's latest hack, broadcasting false retreat signatures, worked perfectly. The arrogant Vexori commander pursued, only to find human ships rising from concealment behind Phobos, shields reinforced with newly decoded Zorith crystalline lattices. The ensuing clash lit Martian skies for hours. When the dreadnought finally cracked under concentrated fire, its reactor breach painted a second sun across the horizon. Mars held. Barely. The colonies were scarred craters and shattered dreams, but the settlers refused evacuation. Instead, they rebuilt faster, angrier, turning wreckage into stronger fortifications. Aya Nakamura sent a message to Earth that echoed around the world: "Tell them we are still here. Tell them Mars is human." That message became a rallying cry. Recruitment surged. Factories on Earth ran hotter. And something else shifted. The remaining neutral species of the old Concord began to whisper again. Secret shipments of rare elements arrived from hidden avian enclaves. Crystalline data cores, long thought lost, surfaced with ancient weapon schematics. Humanity's stubborn refusal to break was cracking the galaxy's fear. Yet victory on Mars came with a terrible revelation. Captured Vexori officers, under truth serum derived from their own venom, revealed the larger plan. The Zorith Overmind had not been merely wounded, it was evolving. Distributed nodes across their empire were merging into a higher, more resilient form, learning from every human tactic. The Vexori had been promised Earth as a hunting preserve once the vermin were exterminated. Worse, a grand armada was assembling beyond Neptune, hundreds of thousands of vessels preparing for total annihilation. Time was no longer on our side. Elena made the hardest call of the war. She split humanity's forces. Half would fortify Sol, turn the entire system into a fortress of mines, automated killsats and decoy worlds. The other half, under her direct command, would go on the offensive. A raid deep into the asteroid belt to destroy the primary Zorith breeding cluster before the new Overmind fully awakened. It was reckless, some called it suicidal, but waiting meant certain death. Mia volunteered to lead the ground assault. Raj insisted on coming to deploy experimental disruptors. Liam quietly upgraded the fleet's navigation AIs with predictive algorithms based on every battle so far. They launched with 200 ships, less than a tenth of the enemy's projected strength, but carrying every trick humanity had learned. The belt became a maze of silent death. Asteroids spun lazily, hiding ambushes. Vexori cloakers stalked the shadows. Zorith bioships grew armor from mined metals. The running battles lasted weeks. Hit, fade, repair, hit again. Human crews slept in shifts measured in minutes. Food came from printed algae bars. Coffee became currency. But slowly, impossibly, they pushed deeper. Raj's disruptors, pulsed EM fields tuned to Zorith pheromone bands, caused entire breeding swarms to cannibalize their own eggs. Liam's algorithms predicted enemy movements with eerie accuracy, turning defensive stands into devastating flanking maneuvers. Mia's Marines boarded and cleared 17 hive asteroids, losing good people on each one but never stopping. The final push reached Ceres, hollowed out and converted into the largest breeding nexus outside Zorith space. Elena's fleet arrived battered, half their number gone, but the enemy was worse, disorganized, fighting on instinct without full Overmind guidance. The battle for Ceres was apocalyptic. Ships rammed ships. Boarding actions turned corridors into slaughterhouses. In the core birthing chamber, Mia faced a proto-overmind, a writhing mass of neural tissue already the size of a skyscraper, reaching out with psychic tendrils. It promised her peace, showed her visions of a galaxy without war. She answered by planting Raj's final disruptor directly into its cortex and triggering overload. The psychic backlash knocked her unconscious, but when she woke, the chamber was silent. The proto-overmind was dead. Humanity won the belt. The cost was staggering, over 60% casualties, entire colonies orphaned, Mars still smoldering. But the Zorith breeding program was set back years. The Grand Armada beyond Neptune hesitated, its coordination fractured. For the first time the enemy knew fear. Elena stood on the Defiance bridge amid flickering lights and wounded crew, staring at the drifting wreckage of Ceres. Her voice was hoarse but steady when she addressed the fleet. We came here to buy time. We bought years. Now we use them. Cheers were quiet, exhausted but real. Because in the tides of war humanity had proven something undeniable. We don't just endure the storm. We learn its rhythm, steal its strength, and turn the tide itself against our enemies. The war was far from over. Bigger storms gathered on the horizon. But for the first time the galaxy looked at Earth and saw not prey, not upstarts, but the species that refuses to yield. And that, friends, is the deepest truth of Part 4. Tides rise and fall, but humanity builds higher walls, stronger ships, and fiercer hearts with every wave that crashes against us. We were no longer defending home. We were coming for them. The victory at Ceres bought humanity breathing room, but everyone knew it was only a pause. Sensor buoys beyond Neptune reported the Grand Armada still gathering, larger than before, angrier, and now fully integrating Vexery strike groups into Zorith high fleets. The enemy had learned from their mistakes, no more underestimating the primitives. They were coming with everything and they were coming soon. Earth's shipyards worked at a frantic pace, spitting out hybrid warships that blended human ingenuity with stolen alien tech. But numbers alone wouldn't be enough. Admiral Elena Vargas knew it. Her team knew it. The whole species knew it. We needed something the enemy didn't expect, a crack in their own alliance. It started with a whisper on an open channel. A single Vexery cruiser, heavily damaged after a skirmish near Uranus, broadcast a surrender request in broken galactic standard. Most human commanders wanted to vaporize it on sight. Payback for Mars, for the glass domes, for the 20,000 voices silenced in Elysium. But Elena ordered a ceasefire. Bring it in, she said. Let's hear what a snake has to say when it's cornered. The cruiser was tractored into the Defiance hangar bay under heavy guard. When the airlock cycled, out slithered a Vexery warlord named Sketh Voss, scales dulled by battle damage, one arm missing below the elbow. He actually knelt, before Elena and her team. Major Mia Chen kept her rifle trained on his head. Dr. Raj Patel scanned for traps. Lieutenant Liam O'Connor recorded every word. We are betrayed, Sketh hissed through the translator implant. The Zorith promised us glory, hunting rights on your worlds. Instead they use us as shields, feed our warriors into breeding vats for spare biomass. The overmind evolves by consuming allies as readily as enemies. The chamber went silent. Elena studied the serpent's slitted eyes and saw something she recognized. Rage born from broken trust. Folks, that's the thing about pride. It cuts both ways. The Vexery had joined the Zorith for profit and prestige, but hives don't share. They absorb. Liam, ever the analyst, cross-referenced the claim against intercepted traffic. Within hours he confirmed it. Vexery casualty rates were triple those of pure Zorith units, and captured Vexery genetic material was being repurposed in hive growth chambers. Raj's bioscanners found traces of Vexery neural patterns woven into lesser overmind nodes. The alliance wasn't a partnership. It was a slow digestion. Elena made her decision. What do you want, warlord? She asked. Sketh's tongue flicked. Revenge. And a future for my people that does not end in Zorith stomachs. A deal was struck. Not friendship, not trust, but mutual interest. Sketh would feed humanity targeting data on Zorith command ships. In exchange, we would help fracture the alliance from within. The plan was audacious. Psychological warfare on a galactic scale. Liam and a team of human coders, working with Sketh's intelligence officers, crafted forged overmind directives. Subtle at first, then blatant, ordering Vexery fleets into suicidal positions, denying them resupply, labeling them expendable biomass. Raj developed a virus that piggybacked on routine Zorith status pings, spreading the forgeries deeper into the Armada. The beauty of it was how perfectly it played on existing tensions. Vexari were already proud, already resentful of Hive obedience. All we did was give them proof that their resentment was justified. The cracks appeared faster than anyone predicted. Out near Pluto, a Vexari battle group refused orders to screen a Zorath breeding ship and instead turned its guns on the Hive vessel, gutting it in minutes. In the Kuiper Belt, 3 Vexari cruisers defected outright, limping toward human lines under flags of parley. Skethvos broadcast an open challenge to his former allies: the snakes will no longer feed the insects. Civil war erupted inside the Grand Armada. Zorath drones swarmed Vexari ships in boarding actions. Vexari blades carved through chitin in corridor-to-corridor slaughter. The Overmind, still recovering from Ceres, struggled to reassert control and only deepened the chaos with panicked overrides. Humanity didn't sit idle. Elena launched spoiling attacks to widen the breach. The Defiant led a wolf pack of fast hybrid destroyers straight into the fractured armada, striking Zorath command nodes while Vexari and Zorath tore at each other. Mia Chen's Marines boarded a Zorath battleship alongside Sketha's elite guard, a sight no one had imagined possible: human soldiers and serpent warriors fighting back-to-back against common prey. Plasma and monomolecular blades flashed in zero-G corridors. Raj deployed pheromone bombs that drove Zorath warriors into berserk frenzy, making them easy targets for Vexari venom rounds. But betrayal cuts both ways and not everyone trusted the snakes. On the moon base at Ganymede, a human battalion commander named Colonel Marcus Hale refused to coordinate with defecting Vexari units. "They glassed Mars?" he growled over comms. "I don't fight beside monsters." When a Vexari squadron arrived to support his defense against the Zorath counterattack, Hale opened fire on them first. The friendly fire incident cost us 3 ships and nearly collapsed the fragile defection wave. Elena had to act fast. She confronted Hale in a public tribunal broadcast across the fleet. "We are at war for survival," she said, voice like tempered steel. "Personal vengeance is a luxury we can't afford. The enemy of my enemy isn't my friend, he's my weapon. We wield him until the real enemy is dead, then we settle accounts if we must." Hale was relieved of command. The message was clear: humanity would use any tool to win, even tools that hissed. The turning point came in the Battle of the Oort Shroud, a sprawling cloud of ancient comets where the Armada had anchored to regroup. Skethvos led a full Vexari rebellion, half their remaining fleet turning on the Zorath core in a storm of cloaked torpedoes and raking fire. Human forces, now reinforced by defectors, struck from the opposite vector. Liam's virus reached critical mass, corrupting Overmind signals across dozens of sectors. Zorath formations disintegrated into mindless swarms. For 12 hours the Oort burned with silent explosions, a graveyard of shattered hives and broken serpents. Victory was ours, but it tasted complicated. The Zorath Grand Armada was reduced to scattered remnants, fleeing toward interstellar space. The Vexari survivors, less than a quarter of their original strength, limped away under truce, Skethvos vowing to purge Zorath influence from his own worlds. He left Elena with a final message: "Your species fights with heart as well as mind. Perhaps one day we will meet again, not as allies but not as enemies." The channel closed. Mia watched the Vexari ships vanish into the dark and muttered, "I'll believe that when snakes grow legs." Back in Seoul, celebrations were muted. We had broken the invasion, turned the enemy's strength against itself, proven that even ancient alliances could be fractured by the right pressure. Mars began rebuilding with new domes stronger than before. Lunar yards laid keels for true interstellar dreadnoughts. Children born during the war took their first steps under clear skies again. But Elena stood on the Defiance observation deck, staring at the distant stars where the Zorath remnants had fled. Raj joined her, prosthetic arm catching the light. "They'll come back," he said quietly. "The Overmind is wounded, humiliated. It will evolve again." Elena nodded. "Then so will we. Because that's the deepest lesson of Part 5, friends. Humans don't just fight with weapons. We fight with ideas, with trust offered strategically, with the ability to see cracks in perfect systems and wedge them wide open. The Zorath thought unity was strength. We showed them that chosen division, turning their own allies against them, can be stronger still. Alliances fractured, the invasion broken, humanity stood taller than ever. But the war wasn't over. The Zorath home clusters still waited beyond the edge of known space, nursing their rage, growing something new and terrible. We had won the battle for Seoul. Now it was time to take the war to them, on our terms, with our rules, and with every lesson carved into our bones. The stars were calling. And humanity was finally ready to answer. The solar system had become a fortress. Orbital rings of automated killsats spun silently around every planet. Minefields of salvaged Zorith warheads drifted in lazy orbits. Mars and the Jovian moons bristled with railgun batteries and shield generators that could shrug off small fleet bombardments. Earth itself was ringed by the largest human fleet ever assembled, over 900 hybrid warships, many born from the fused corpses of enemy vessels. Yet everyone aboard the U.S. Defiant knew the truth: defense alone would never end this war. The Zorith would keep coming, regenerating, adapting in their cold, methodical way. The only way to finish it was to carry the fight to their heart. Admiral Elena Vargas stood on the flag bridge, hands clasped behind her back, staring at the strategic hologram that dominated the chamber. A thin red line traced the planned route, a daring jump through contested space, past 3 relay stations across the Orion Spur, straight to the Zorith core cluster known as the Nest of 1,000 Queens. Intelligence, much of it provided by the defected Vexari warlord Sketh Voss, showed the cluster contained the primary Overmind Nexus, the oldest and most powerful node in their empire. Destroy that, and the entire hive mind would collapse like a body without a brain. The fleet was divided into 3 task forces. Task Force Hammer, led by Elena herself aboard the Defiant, would be the spearhead, 200 of the fastest, most heavily armed ships. Task Force Anvil, under Major Mia Chin, would follow 2 jumps behind, ready to exploit any breach. Task Force Shield, commanded by Commander Sofia Ramirez, who had miraculously survived the Hive raid thanks to emergency nano-repair, would guard the supply line and act as a rapid response hammer if the spearhead was cut off. Every crew knew the odds. The jump distance was at the extreme edge of their drives. Resupply would be nearly impossible. Casualty projections hovered around 60% even in the most optimistic simulations. Yet not a single ship requested to stand down. The night before departure, Elena walked the corridors of the Defiant. She found Lieutenant Liam O'Connor in the signals bay, still refining the virus that had already broken so many Zorith formations. He looked up, dark circles under his eyes. "It's ready," he said quietly. "This version doesn't just corrupt, it rewrites. It turns their own neural architecture against them. They'll feel every drone they lose as if it were their own body being torn apart." Elena laid a hand on his shoulder. "You've given us a weapon they never imagined." "Thank you." Liam managed a small, tired smile. "Just make sure we get close enough to use it." Dr. Raj Patel was in the main hangar overseeing the final loading of his newest invention, the Resonance Lance. A weapon that would fire a tightly focused pulse tuned to the exact harmonic frequency of Zorith neural tissue. If it worked, it could fry an Overmind node from a distance of several thousand kilometers. If it failed, well, they wouldn't live long enough to worry about that. Raj looked up as Elena entered. "I've named it Goodbye," he said with a wry grin. Seemed appropriate. Elena laughed despite herself, the first real laugh in weeks. The fleet jumped at 0400 ship time. The transition was brutal. Engines screamed as they tore open artificial wormholes. Ships emerged one by one into unknown space, sensors sweeping for threats. The first relay station was a graveyard, Zorith hulks still smoldering from an earlier Vexari betrayal. The second was defended by a picket fleet of over 1,000 drones. Task Force Hammer smashed through in a storm of railgun fire and plasma lances. They lost 23 ships in 18 minutes. Mia's voice crackled over the command channel. "We're right behind you. Keep moving." The deeper they pushed, the stranger the space became. Stars grew dimmer, older. Nebulae of ionized gas glowed with sickly green light. Zorith relay beacons pulsed like heartbeats. And then, on the 8th day, they reached the edge of the Nest cluster. Hundreds of hive worlds orbited a massive, ancient red giant. Thousands of kilometers-long breeding arcs drifted between them like sleeping leviathans. At the center hung the Overmind Nexus itself, a colossal living sphere the size of a small moon, wrapped in layers of armored chitin and shielded by overlapping energy fields that could have swallowed entire fleets. Elena gave the order. "All ships, attack pattern Omega. Shield, hold the rear. Anvil, prepare for the breach. Hammer, go in hard and fast." The battle that followed would be remembered as the single largest naval engagement in recorded galactic history. Human ships dove straight into the enemy formation, ignoring perfect defensive lines to target the weakest points Raj had identified, the junctions where hive ships connected to the central nexus. Vexari defectors, fewer than 50 ships, fought alongside them, their cloaked cruisers slipping through gaps to plant boarding torpedoes. Zorith warriors poured out in endless waves, trying to overwhelm the invaders through sheer biomass. Plasma beams carved glowing scars across hulls. Railgun slugs punched clean through armored carapaces. Ships died in silence, blooming into brief suns. Mia Chen's Marines launched in waves of assault shuttles, targeting the Nexus itself. They fought their way through kilometers of living corridors, walls that bled acid, floors that shifted to trap boots, air thick with spores that burned lungs. Mia led from the front, plasma torch in one hand, shield in the other. "Push," she roared. "We're not here to occupy, we're here to kill the brain." Inside the Defiant, Raj waited at the Resonance Lance console. The weapon needed a clear line of sight and 30 seconds of uninterrupted power. Elena maneuvered the flagship through a storm of enemy fire, shields flaring red as they buckled. "Now Raj," she shouted. The lance fired, a needle-thin beam of pure harmonic disruption. It struck the Nexus dead center. For a heartbeat nothing happened. Then the Overmind screamed. The psychic backlash was like a supernova in the mind. Every human aboard the fleet staggered. Memories of lost loved ones, fears of failure, visions of Earth in flames flooded their thoughts. Liam collapsed over his console, blood running from his nose. Elena gripped the command rail until her knuckles turned white. "Hold," she snarled through clenched teeth. "Hold the line." The Nexus began to convulse. Cracks spread across its surface. Breeding arcs drifted aimlessly as their connection to the central mind failed. Zorith warriors froze mid-attack, then turned on each other in blind panic. The fleet pressed the advantage, tearing into the disorganized enemy with ruthless precision. But the Overmind was not finished. A final desperate countermeasure. It ejected a massive escape pod, armored, shielded, carrying a backup neural core. It streaked away at maximum acceleration, heading for the outer dark. Elena saw it on the tactical display and understood instantly. "We cannot let that escape," she said. "It will start the cycle again." She made the call no commander ever wants to make. Defiant, full emergency thrust. Ram the escape pod. All hands, abandon ship. Escape pods only. This is not a drill. The crew moved with disciplined speed. Lifeboats jettisoned in every direction. Raj stayed at the lance controls until the last possible second, sending one final pulse into the Nexus. Mia's voice came over the comm, hoarse but steady. "We've got the core chamber. Charges set. Get out of here, Elena." Elena stayed on the bridge alone. She watched the escape pod growing larger on the main viewer. The Defiant's engines screamed as they pushed the wounded ship to its absolute limit. Alarms wailed. Bulkheads groaned. She opened a final ship-wide broadcast. "This is Admiral Vargas. You've all done something impossible. You've shown the galaxy what humanity is capable of. I'm proud to have served with every one of you. Now live. Fight on. And remember, we are not done." The Defiant struck the escape pod at full velocity. Both vessels vanished in a blinding white detonation that lit the red giant like a second dawn. When the light faded, the nest cluster was silent. The Overmind Nexus crumbled into drifting fragments. The remaining Zorith ships powered down, their warriors collapsing into torpor without direction. The human fleet, battered, bleeding but victorious, began recovery operations. Lifeboats were gathered. Survivors were pulled from wreckage. Mia Chen, bloodied and limping, stood on the bridge of the Anvil's flagship and looked at the fading glow where the Defiant had been. "She bought us the ending," she whispered. And so the final push ended, not with a cheer but with a quiet, exhausted silence. The war was over. The Zorith Empire had fallen. Humanity stood among the ruins, scarred, diminished but unbroken. The stars, once threatening, now felt strangely open. The silence after the final explosion was unlike anything the survivors had ever known. No engines roaring, no plasma beams slicing the dark, no frantic chatter on open channels. Just the soft hum of life support systems and the distant creak of cooling hull plates. The nest of 1,000 queens was gone, reduced to a slowly expanding cloud of organic debris and glittering metal fragments orbiting a dying red giant. The primary Overmind was dead. The Zorith Empire, which had terrorized the galaxy for millennia, had no guiding intelligence left. What remained of their fleets drifted powerless, warriors curled into fetal stillness, queens barren and silent. The war was over. But endings are never clean. Major Mia Chin stood on the temporary bridge of the UES Anvil's Wrath, the flagship that had taken command after the Defiant's sacrifice. Her armor was cracked and scorched, her face lined with fresh cuts and old scars. Around her, the surviving command staff worked in quiet efficiency, plotting recovery vectors, cataloging damage, searching for lifeboats among the wreckage. Lieutenant Liam O'Connor sat at a console, eyes red from strain and grief, running final confirmation sweeps. Dr. Raj Patel, prosthetic arm mangled but still functional, coordinated with engineering teams to stabilize wounded ships. Commander Sofia Ramirez, patched up yet again, oversaw marine search and rescue operations. They were all that remained of the original team that had started this impossible journey years ago on a single battered cruiser called Endeavour. Mia stared at the main view screen, where the fading glow of the Defiant's detonation still lingered like a ghost. Elena Vargas had given everything to ensure the backup core never escaped. No escape pod had been detected from the flagship. No final transmission beyond her calm, steady farewell. Mia's voice when she finally spoke was rough. "She bought us tomorrow," she said to the bridge at large. "Let's make sure it's worth the price." Recovery took weeks. Human and Vexari defectors worked side by side, uneasy, watchful, but united in the shared exhaustion of survival. Thousands of lifeboats were recovered. Tens of thousands were not. Entire ships were simply gone, erased in the fury of the last battle. The fleet that limped home to Sol was barely a third of the force that had left. Mars greeted them with solemn salutes from rebuilt domes. Earth's skies filled with contrails as shuttles ferried survivors planetside. Cities that had lived under blackout for years turned their lights back on all at once, a wave of illumination rolling across continents like sunrise chasing night. On Earth, the homecoming was bittersweet. Parades formed spontaneously, people lining streets, holding hand-painted signs that read, "Thank you," and "We remember." Children waved flags stitched from whatever fabric families had saved. Veterans of the ground war embraced orbital crews they had only known as voices on the comm, but every celebration carried quiet spaces where fallen friends should have stood. Graves were dug on hillsides overlooking rebuilt cities. Names were carved into memorial walls that stretched for kilometers. Elena Vargas's name sat at the very top, beneath a simple inscription. She held the line so we could cross it. Months turned into years. Humanity did what it always does after catastrophe. We rebuilt, we learned, and we reached farther. The old galactic concord, shattered by centuries of fear and appeasement, slowly reformed, this time with Earth at its center. Avian diplomats returned from hidden enclaves, their elegant wings folding in respect as they requested audience. Crystalline scholars emerged from forgotten nebulae, offering ancient knowledge in exchange for protection. Even a few Vexari delegations arrived, scales polished, tongues careful, led by an older, wiser Sketh Voss. They did not ask for forgiveness, only for a place in the new order where strength was respected and betrayal punished. Humanity granted it warily because,